Hi everyone, welcome to another Facebook Live with Equal Exes, and I'd like to welcome Kate Sheehan again. Hi, how are you, Kate?
Hi, Bridgette. Good, thanks. Hi, everyone.
Now, you've had at least 20 years experience, haven't you, in this field?
Yeah, I've been practicing law for a long time, feels like. So,
Well, you're very knowledgeable and very experienced. So our topic today is how to get a divorce in New Zealand. So everything that you need to know, we will tell you in this Facebook Live, won't we?
yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't actually know how to get a divorce. So that's kind of the purpose of today's seminar is to inform people on how to get a divorce in New Zealand.
Yeah, and I think people don't realise there's a 2-year stand down in terms of that either. You know, they don't have any idea. So the first question is, from your perspective, where do people start?
Well, I mean that's the thing. Firstly, in order to get a divorce, there's effectively two ways you can have a divorce. There's like an amicable divorce, or there's like a contested or a court contested divorce. So I think that's really the kind of like the starting point for people to know that even if it's amicable, you still have to go through certain steps to get the divorce. So in terms of the key aspect to this, in terms of getting a divorce, as Bridgette said, what a lot of people don't know is you've got to wait 2 years that you've been living apart or separated, and not domiciled in New Zealand doesn't count either. So if you're overseas, there's technically an issue there potentially as well. So you've got to actually wait a period of 2 years.
What a question I've got, Kate, is what if a couple have got back to have been with each other during that period for a 3-month period, or have gone backwards and forwards, been with each other over that time period?
Yeah, well, that's what's tricky, is because the court will take it from the technical date of separation. So if you split up and get back together, then that's not the separation date. You've got to wait a bit longer in terms of the time frame sometimes, unless you can both agree on the date. If you both agree on the date, then that's fine because you both agreed on the separation date. But it's got to be 2 years from that date before you can actually apply for the divorce.
And why do people need to get divorced?
Well, people need to get divorced for legal reasons, as well as the fact that they may want to get married to someone else. You can't actually legally get married to someone else if you're not divorced. So that's one reason. The other reason is just because of legal reasons, such as somebody owning a house and them wanting it to go to their children and not to the ex-partner. And so you need to technically get a divorce and change the will. So they're kind of the two main reasons, and some people just want to move on with someone else. So that's generally what happens.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us more about that, about the process of that in terms of getting a divorce.
Yeah, well, so basically to get a divorce, some information is available on the Family Court website of how to do this, or the Ministry of Justice website, I think, on how to do it. So there's a few steps that you need to go through. So perhaps I'll summarize the steps and then go through each one. So the first one was the 2-year one, which we've just raised. The second one, if you've got children involved, you actually need to agree on the care of the children. And you need to have like what's called a parenting plan. And the court must be satisfied that the arrangements are suitable. So it's not just suitable to you when you file for the divorce. You have to file any parenting or care arrangements that you've got between you and any parenting plan with the court, so that the court is satisfied that the arrangements are suitable. So that's kind of the second step. So that's where it's really important that you do some kind of parenting plan by agreement or mediation, or try and reach agreement with each other as to
And you
what's
can
going to
even do that through the likes of yourself or myself as well. We do parenting plans too. So
That's right. We help people, or they can reach their own agreement. It's really up to them. But there are tools available for people to do it themselves. They don't have to have a lawyer in place for that parenting stage, but it is helpful to get advice before you sign up to any legally binding documents.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
In relation to that step.
So how do you apply for a divorce?
So basically, you've got to apply to the family court for a divorce. So you can either apply together, i.e. jointly, like a joint application, alternatively, one of you can apply for the divorce, and that would be what's called like a contested divorce, where somebody doesn't want to get divorced but the other party does want to get divorced. So you still have to apply to the family court, and you've still got to follow each of the steps along the way. So perhaps the next step, which is like step 4, which is probably the most important step, which people need to deal with, is to divide any relationship property or separate property. So they actually need to have a Section 21 agreement generally that's represents a fair and equitable split and division of relationship property in order to get your divorce. That's really what the courts are saying. Is that
so everything that you own and owe,
everything that you own and own needs to be sorted out, because the court may not grant the divorce if you haven't gone through the step. So you need to go through the steps required in order to obtain the divorce from the courts. And this is probably like the most contentious and the most difficult step for people to kind of get over if it's contentious and not by agreement, because one party might want something and the other party might want something else. And it's just a matter of reaching agreement between each other as to how you're going to split and divide up the property. So it does actually have to be by agreement. So when you do the affidavits and file the application, you actually have to say whether you've agreed or not. And sometimes you've got to provide the agreement to the court as well in order for the court to actually decide whether to dissolve the marriage and grant the divorce.
Yeah. And if people can do that process around a kitchen table after you've both had some legal advice, and then you agree on the split of that, and then obviously get your lawyers to sign off independently on that agreement, is the best way to go. Or if you can't do that by yourselves, then get a mediator involved, go to mediation, because the last thing you want to do is to be going to court. The emotional toll, the time it takes, and the cost is just huge.
It is, and I think agreement is the best method. Even if you don't agree on everything, if you agree on some things, at least we can reach agreement on some items, and then you're only left with the major items left to try and resolve. So even if you at least do partial agreement or partial mediation, that still helps in trying to resolve the division of the property issues. So it's a really important thing. A lot of people don't know about this until they come to get divorced, and then they find out about it. So it's just good that people know that this is like the process that you have to go through. And it really is like a process and a step-by-step kind of process to get where you want to get to, which is to get the divorce.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what relationship property is. There are questions, for example, like, is my ex's inheritance, am I going to be entitled to that, for example?
Yeah, well, relationship property is tricky, and this is why you need legal advice effectively before signing these agreements off, to give each party. There's two ways you do it. First of all, you decide what is the relationship property, and you decide what is the separate property of each person. So you have to decide that first, and then depending on that, it all goes into like what's called a pool of relationship property. And then you kind of split or divide it up depending on how you wish to do that, either by agreement or alternatively, if you can't agree, by mediation, if you agree to that, or alternatively by the court. So you want to try and reach agreement if you can on what actually comprises the relationship property. And people, some things that people think are not relationship property or chattels actually are, like the dog is a good example. Air points, Bitcoin, paintings, artwork, things like that can be considered to be relationship property. So it's quite important that you actually seek advice on what is relationship property and what is separate property. I think that's a big distinction. People think just because it's mine, it's not the other person's, but that could actually be not the case, turn out to not be the case. And so you need to get proper advice on that.
You need to be educated, absolutely, before you sign anything off. It's prudent. I have some clients say, well, we don't think we need a lawyer to sign off on or lawyers plural to sign off on our agreement. But at the end of the day, you just never know what's going to happen in the future, and it's prudent to do that. Absolutely prudent.
Well, that's right, and you should be knowing what you're signing up for, giving up in terms of value as well. I think that's quite important. Like, if you're conceding something, you need to know what the approximate value of it is, or if alternatively, if you're getting it in your favour, you also need to know what it is, because there could be economic disparity arguments or financial disadvantage arguments run after the event. So you need to know what you own and what you owe, as Bridgette always says.
Yeah, that's my favourite line. And I think that because it's very, it's very costly and time consuming to undo a settlement agreement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot harder to do that after the event. It's much easier to try and just request the information and assess the position at the time. And there should be some form of financial disclosure. This needs to be like, it's not being dealt with very well, but people need to disclose all of their financial, assets, debts, and liabilities when you're doing these agreements, because you need to know what you're signing up for. If you don't know what you're signing up for, there's a chance that the agreements can be overturned. So it's really important in these cases that is done or requested, and your lawyer should inform you to request some form of financial disclosure.
Yeah. The last thing you want to do is have to go to court for discovery.
Yeah, that's right. It's just expensive, and people will hide money, so to speak, in trusts or companies or vehicles or things like that, but it really doesn't go to your advantage. It's more to your advantage just to disclose it and then try and put a value on it rather than not disclosing it at all.
So the next step really is that the judge looks at the application, don't they? And what happens from there?
Yeah, so once you've actually, if you're doing it by agreement, once you've lodged your application, which requires an application and an affidavit, which needs to be sworn in front of a lawyer, once you've done that, the judge will assess the application and they'll either issue a dissolution order and not require you to attend court. So you can do it by agreement, then you don't have to go to court, and the registrar or the judge will look at the application and issue the order. But if it's only one party divorce and the other party doesn't agree, then you may also have to attend and appear before the registrar or a judge on your application, and they may ask you questions about your application before they will issue any court orders or dissolution orders.
What sort of questions will they potentially ask, Kate?
Well, I think the judges generally ask about the care of the children. I think that's number one, whether you've got a suitable arrangement. And I think they also ask, have you managed to divide your relationship properly, because they don't want to grant the divorce if there's still, issues to be dealt with there. So I think those are the kind of the two aspects that you need to be clear on when you go and apply for a divorce in the courts in New Zealand.
Is there anything else that people need to consider when they're going through this process?
Well, the other thing that you've got to get is a marriage certificate as well. If you've been married, you also need to request one from the Births, Deaths and Marriages website or online site and pay for that, because you've also got to provide that with the affidavit to the court. A lot of people miss that out, and then the application gets rejected, and then you've got to resubmit it. So that should also be provided with the application to the court. And just generally, I think seeking legal advice, it doesn't have to be expensive. You can do some of these steps yourself if you know what it is that you've got to do. That's the thing. And if you go through the steps involved, it doesn't have to be really expensive. It can actually end up being cost effective. But if you don't go through the steps and there's hurdles along the way, that's when it becomes a bit more costly and a bit more expensive for people.
So what happens in terms of the scenario where you're divorced but you want to keep your married name?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I think that you can do that because your name is effectively changed on the Births, Deaths and Marriages register, and it's up to you as the person who changed the name in the first place to change it back. So that can be a contentious point sometimes when some people don't want to change their name, but it's quite difficult
to make
someone do it. You'd have to probably get a court order when you're applying for the dissolution of marriage, perhaps ask the court for a direction and or order that that person change their name, but it's a very difficult, tricky thing to enforce.
Yeah, that's it. Well, Kate, thank you very much for that really informative 20 minutes today on how to get a divorce and everything you need to know about it. If you would like to connect with Kate or myself, do contact Equal Exes, or you can contact Kate. Kate, how can people get in contact with you?
Yep, people can just email me, kate@katesheehan.co.nz. I've got a website. You can do online booking for consultations as well, or you can contact me through Bridgette, and Bridgette does give me some referral matters so that I can actually help you try and reach agreement on any parenting orders and relationship property issues so that you can actually get a divorce.
Yeah, wonderful. So we will be back next month with another topic that is really going to help many people. If you're going through the process, do reach out. We're always happy to help. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bridgette. Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure.